Ready to step off the map from the most hidden alleyways to the stories nobody told you? Uncharted Alleyways begins now. Your definitive guide in travel podcast, culture, adventure, and the world as you've never heard it. Tune in, disconnect from the obvious, and come explore with us. Uncharted Alleyways, your next trip starts here.
Imagine walking out of your front door to grab a morning coffee, and the absolute quickest route forces you to step directly over the footprint of a 2,000-year-old sports stadium.
Right, just on your morning commute.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in almost any other city on Earth, that space is aggressively fenced off. It's a dedicated museum, you know?
Yeah.
It requires a ticket, a queue, a hushed voice. But in Rome, it is literally just Tuesday. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking directly at you, our listener, the person who is just insanely curious.
The one who wants to really understand the DNA of a place.
Yes, but without drowning in some dry chronological encyclopedia. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants that.
Right. So today our mission is to unpack this incredibly immersive audio travel guide. It's titled Rome, the Eternal City Through Uncharted Alleyways.
And the stated goal of this source material is to bypass that standard checklist of monuments. Because a checklist, well, it just tells you where things are geographically.
Yeah, it's just a map.
Exactly. We are going to extract the essence of the city's unique rhythm. We want to look at how millennia of history completely dictate modern daily life and basically prepare you to experience this ancient capital not as a spectator, but as an active participant.
We're going to make you an expert on the underlying mindset of Rome long before you even pull a suitcase out of the closet. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the sheer psychological impact of arrival.
The arrival is intense.
It really is. The source paints this very vivid progression of flying into Fiumicino Airport, getting on the train, and just watching the landscape shift. You leave the quiet countryside, you start seeing these dense apartment blocks, random ancient brick walls, church domes.
Then you step out.
And then the doors open and you are hit by an absolute wall of kinetic energy. The guide points out the sheer sensory overload. You've got scooters weaving through this incredibly tight traffic, the heavy scent of espresso just spilling right onto the street.
Bells ringing everywhere.
Yeah, bells ringing, people shouting greetings across piazzas. But, I mean, I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
I understand the romantic idea of, like, surrendering to the rhythm, but isn't that just a really polite way of saying the city has terrible traffic, chaotic infrastructure, and you just have to deal with it?
Well, I mean, that is the immediate modern assumption, right? We expect urban spaces to be these highly engineered machines designed entirely for our convenience.
Right, grids and optimized traffic flow.
Exactly. You build a grid, you optimize it, you schedule your itinerary down to the minute. But the source argues that Rome actively resists being scheduled because it was just never designed for your modern convenience.
It's a bit older than that.
Slightly, yeah. It has survived the rise and fall of empires, plagues, sacks, and it remains unapologetically itself. So if you try to impose a rigid, linear itinerary onto it, you're only going to find frustration.
That makes sense. It actually reminds me of listening to a completely new genre of music for the first time.
Oh, how so?
Well, if your ear is trained for very rigid four-on-the-floor pop music, and suddenly someone puts on a complex, sprawling jazz record, your brain tries to force that pop music beat onto the jazz track.
And you end up totally frustrated.
Exactly. It just sounds like noise. You have to actively stop clapping your own beat, sit back, and literally just listen to find the underlying rhythm of the new track. The guide even notes that a walk to your hotel takes twice as long, not because you're lost, but because you're stopping to look at hidden courtyards and ivy-covered doorways.
What's fascinating here is how well that analogy holds up throughout the entire source material. You cannot force a pop music tempo on Rome. It just doesn't work. Rome doesn't try to impress you. It just exists.
Right.
If you fight it, you remain a rushed outsider. But if you join it, you become part of the band. And the rhythm of Rome is highly, highly specific.
Yeah, the guide says it starts early and aggressively fast.
Very fast. Locals at the neighborhood cafe aren't lounging around with laptops.
Oh no, definitely not.
They stand at the counter, Take a quick scalding shot of espresso, have a rapid-fire conversation with the barista, and immediately leave.
All while delivery vans try to squeeze down these cobblestone streets that were laid out before the combustion engine was even a concept.
Exactly.
The tempo is frantic in the morning.
Frantic, yeah, until the afternoon, and then the tempo completely drops. Lunch is not a sad sandwich eaten at a desk, you know. It is a dedicated, unhurried block of time to gather and converse.
But the most vital cultural shift happens in the evening, right? Which brings us to a core concept in the audio guide, the passeggiata.
Ah, yes, the passeggiata.
The evening stroll. The source describes this as the moment the whole city just seems to exhale. Families come out, children chase pigeons across the public squares, couples walk arm in arm, teenagers gather outside gelato shops.
It's an event.
It is. And the goal isn't to arrive at a destination. The goal is simply to be together in the public space. It sounds incredibly romantic, almost cinematic, honestly.
It is highly romanticized by outsiders, for sure, but there is a deeply practical socioeconomic reality driving the passeggiata that really grounds it in everyday life.
Like the heat. Right.
Exactly. Historically, and even today, many apartments in the historic center of Rome are incredibly small. They are housed in buildings that are hundreds of years old, often lacking central air conditioning, with tiny little windows.
So you're basically baking in there.
You really are. During a sweltering Roman summer, you do not stay inside a cramped, hot apartment. You go outside because you literally have to. The public squares essentially serve as the extended living rooms for the working class.
That makes perfect sense. The public squares aren't just architectural showpieces, they are functional necessities, which perfectly transitions us from the rhythm of the city to the actual physical stage where that rhythm plays out, the piazzas.
Right, the gathering spaces.
The source takes us to Piazza Navona, which it explicitly labels Rome's outdoor living room.
And it functions exactly like a living room. It is welcoming, it is chaotic, and it is where life happens. You have street artists setting up easels under umbrellas, musicians playing acoustic sets that bounce off all those Baroque facades.
Waiters balancing trays of sparkling water while dodging kids.
Yes, kids just running across the cobblestones everywhere. And at the center is the Fountain of the Four Rivers.
Which is massive.
Imposing, massive sculpture by Bernini with rushing water. It is vibrantly, loudly alive.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source casually drops this mind-bending detail about the actual geometry of the piazza. It is shaped like a long, flat oval. It isn't a square or a rectangle at all.
Yeah, that oval shape is very distinct.
And the reason it's an oval is that the modern piazza is built directly on top of the Stadium of Domitian, which is an ancient Roman arena built over 2,000 years ago.
It's wild.
It is. Modern children are playing tag on the exact footprint where ancient athletes used to compete.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanism of how that happened is a perfect illustration of how Rome deals with its past.
That's so.
Well, when the Roman Empire fell, they didn't bring in bulldozers to clear out the ancient stadium. Over the centuries, the track just filled with silt and dirt, which naturally raised the ground level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and during the Middle Ages, citizens simply used the massive tiered stone seating of the stadium as foundations for their new houses.
You just built right on top of the bleachers.
Exactly. And those houses eventually became grand palaces, but they followed the exact curve of the ancient seating. So the empty space in the middle, the track, became the public square.
That is just incredible. History isn't sterile there. I mean, in so many cities, ancient history is put behind glass. In Rome, history is literally the floor you walk on to get your morning pastry.
It's just part of the furniture.
Yeah. The source highlights this elderly man feeding pigeons by the fountain, operating with the patience of someone who has done this every single day for a decade. And that man is standing on a 2,000-year-old stadium next to a priceless 17th century fountain doing something entirely mundane.
The ancient and the everyday are just inseparable.
Totally inseparable.
And this forces a psychological shift in the traveler, I think. You stop trying to sightsee and you start experiencing this layering of time.
Right.
But the source material doesn't let us stay in that bustling, open-air living room for long. It takes us on a short walk through a series of winding, tight alleyways, and we arrive at a space that acts like a sudden, dead stop in that jazz track we talked about earlier.
It forces all that kinetic energy to absolute zero.
The Pantheon.
The Pantheon. You transition from these narrow, chaotic streets to the imposing, heavy front of the Pantheon. They're these massive, monolithic granite columns that hint at what's inside, but nothing actually prepares you for crossing the threshold.
No, it's a shock.
You step inside, and the guide notes that every single person does the exact same thing. They immediately look up.
It is an involuntary physical reaction to the scale of the space, because you are looking at the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built in human history.
See, I have to pause here because this is where I constantly see this modern arrogance creep in.
Oh, for sure.
We just assume that newer is automatically better,
Right.
that we are currently at the absolute peak of engineering. I mean, we have municipal departments today that can't patch a pothole without it crumbling again in 6 months.
That is painfully true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet here's an ancient civilization pouring a massive, unreinforced concrete dome, no steel rebar, no modern machinery, that survives fires, wars, and actual earthquakes for 2 millennia.
2,000 years?
People talk about Roman engineering almost like it's magic.
Yeah.
But it's just concrete, isn't it? We have concrete. Why is this structurally different?
Well, it isn't magic, but it is a deeply sophisticated understanding of chemistry and weight distribution. Roman concrete differs significantly from modern Portland cement.
Okay.
They used a specific volcanic ash called putzolana. And when you mix that with lime and seawater, it triggers a chemical reaction that actually makes the concrete stronger over time rather than degrading.
Wait, really? Stronger?
Yeah, it effectively heals its own microcracks when water hits it.
They were building self-healing architecture. That is insane.
It's brilliant. Furthermore, they understood that a dome that massive would just collapse under its own weight if they poured it uniformly. So as they built higher, they fundamentally changed the recipe.
Oh, to make it lighter.
Exactly. At the base of the dome, they mixed heavy travertine rock into the concrete. As they moved toward the top, they used increasingly lighter materials, eventually mixing in pure pumice.
Pumice, like the stone.
Yeah, it's a volcanic rock so light it literally floats on water. By the time they reached the apex, the concrete was incredibly light, which massively reduced the downward thrust.
And right at that apex is the oculus, a giant, open, circular hole. No glass, no roof covering, just a 30-foot opening straight to the sky.
Which means the elements are entirely incorporated into the design. Sunlight pours through that hole, creating a distinct beam of light that tracks across the interior marble as the day progresses.
It acts like a massive sundial.
Exactly.
But I mean, when it rains, it literally rains inside the building.
It does.
The idea of leaving a giant hole in your absolute masterpiece seems absurd today. But the ancient builders embedded these tiny, brilliant drains directly into the sloping marble floor.
They planned for everything.
They really did. The water hits the floor and just quietly disappears. They were so confident in their math and their drainage system that they embraced the weather rather than trying to shut it out.
This raises an important question about the psychological weight a space like that commands.
Yeah, the vibe of the room.
Right. The source makes a brilliant observation about human behavior inside the Pantheon. Even when the room is packed shoulder to shoulder with thousands of tourists, visitors instinctively lower their voices to a whisper.
There is no guard yelling for quiet.
Exactly. The architecture itself enforces reverence. It is a space designed to make the individual feel incredibly small in the face of human ambition.
It genuinely humbles you. But, Rome isn't purely about massive, intimidating dominance either.
No, not at all.
As the audio guide continues, we learn that the city has a profound sense of theatricality. It loves a good magic trick.
It really does play with you.
Because the layout of the city is this tight, chaotic maze, it uses its own claustrophobic geography to hide its grandest monuments until the very last second.
And that maze layout is another historical accident, actually.
Really?
Yeah, after the fall of the Roman Empire, during the Gothic Wars, the ancient aqueducts that supplied water to the higher hills were cut.
Oh, so they lost their water supply.
Right. The population had to abandon the organized, grid-like streets of ancient Rome and crowd down by a bend in the Tiber River just to have drinking water.
That makes sense.
They built haphazardly on top of ruins without any central urban planning whatsoever. That medieval scramble resulted in the labyrinth of narrow, shadowy alleyways that completely define the historic center today.
Which creates the ultimate setup for an architectural reveal.
Yeah.
I mean, you are walking down a narrow, dark street where you can almost touch the buildings on both sides.
It's very tight.
And the source asks you to imagine the auditory experience. You start hearing this heavy, rushing water echoing off the brick walls, but you can't see anything.
Just the sound.
Yeah, and then you turn a corner, the tight street suddenly evaporates, and you are standing in front of the Trevi Fountain.
The scale of the Trevi Fountain in that tight space is just shocking. It doesn't just sit in the square, it consumes the entire facade of a palace.
It's huge.
It is a sprawling cascade of sculpted marble, mythical figures, and a massive turquoise pool. It orchestrates a complete emotional reaction by violently contrasting the tight, dark alleyway with this absolute explosion of light, water, and space.
Of course, it is usually surrounded by thousands of people tossing coins over their shoulders, right? The famous tradition to ensure a return trip to Rome.
The classic tourist move.
Exactly. The source mentions the coin toss, but it quickly pivots to a much more valuable piece of advice for the Trevi Fountain. It tells you to come back late at night. The guide uses this fantastic phrase. It says, to visit when the guidebooks go to sleep.
That's a great line. And the time of day radically alters the character of the city. When the guidebooks go to sleep, the massive crowds thin out.
It empties out.
The soft artificial lighting catches the rushing water, the ambient noise of the crowd is gone, and the acoustics of the fountain completely take over the square.
So it transitions from a chaotic tourist frenzy into a deeply reflective, almost private encounter.
It becomes an entirely different monument.
Which ties heavily into our next stop as the daylight softens the Spanish Steps. Another absolute icon of the city.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a sweeping, graceful staircase leading up to a church, historically serving as a meeting place for artists, poets, and locals, covered in flower displays in the warmer months.
But the source doesn't just point out that the Spanish Steps exist. It provides a very specific instruction on how to physically interact with them.
Right.
Because the impulse is to immediately march all the way to the top or just sit at the bottom, but the guide instructs the listener to walk halfway up, stop, turn around, and look back out over the city.
So what does this all mean? Why that specific instruction?
It emphasizes the recurring theme throughout this entire audio guide, the power of perspective. Changing how and when you look at Rome completely dictates what you extract from it.
It changes the whole experience.
Exactly. From halfway up the Spanish Steps, you don't just see the square below. You see a sea of terracotta rooftops, the grand domes of churches rising up in the distance.
And the realization that those narrow, winding streets you just navigated are hiding countless other piazzas, fountains, and secrets.
The city requires you to actively shift your perspective to comprehend its scale.
Which brings us to the final piece of advice the source leaves us with as it wraps up this first portion of the journey. It is a command to completely embrace the art of slowing down.
Put the camera away.
Yes, to engage the senses rather than just the camera lens, specifically by finding a neighborhood gelateria.
But the guide is very practical here. It explicitly warns against gelato piled high in mountains with neon colors.
Yeah, the tourist traps.
Yeah. True artisanal gelato relies on natural ingredients. The colors should be muted.
Look for the creamy pistachio that actually looks earthy, or the rich, dark chocolate, bright lemon, fragrant hazelnut. The instruction is simple. Get your gelato. Stop for a quick espresso. Browse a tiny, dusty bookstore.
Just exist in the space.
Listen to the church bells echoing off the stone. Just walk, without a map and without a destination.
You are making the crucial transition from trying to see everything to trying to notice everything. That is the core thesis of the guide.
Notice, don't just see.
Right. The famous landmarks, the Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain, they are undeniably incredible. But the source argues that your most profound, unforgettable memories will invariably be the unexpected, quiet moments that happen in the margins, right between the monuments.
You're not checking boxes anymore. Now, this audio guide actually has a part 2 that we won't be covering today, but it promises to take the listener deeper into the heavy hitters of ancient Rome.
The Colosseum, the Roman Forum, Palatine Hill.
Exactly. It also teases crossing the Piber River into the working-class Trastevere neighborhood and dives into the practical tips on the best local trattorias and affordable places to stay.
It essentially takes the philosophical mindset we just discussed, the rhythm, the perspective, the layering of history, and applies it practically to navigating the densest tourist zones.
But before we officially wrap up our analysis of this first part, let's pull back and look at the whole picture. We've talked about surrendering to the chaotic rhythm, the history woven into the everyday living rooms of the piazzas.
And the staggering, self-healing architecture that humbles us.
Yeah, all of it.
I think there is a deeply profound question hiding beneath all of this architectural analysis, though.
Oh, but what's that?
Well, if you are a modern Roman and you live your entire life in a city where your daily commute involves walking over a 2,000-year-old stadium, where your neighborhood bakery shares a load-bearing wall with an eternal monument,
Right.
How does that constant exposure change your personal relationship with time?
Wow. That is a heavy, fascinating concept to grapple with.
Think about it closely. In most modern cities, we view ourselves as the absolute owners of our environment. We build it, we tear it down, it belongs to our current generation.
Right, it's ours.
But if you are surrounded by that level of ancient permanence, do modern Romans still view themselves as owners? Or do they view themselves simply as temporary custodians of a living, breathing museum?
Temporary custodians.
It completely reframes human existence when the cobblestones under your feet have quietly outlasted dozens of empires.
That is a phenomenal thought to sit with, and it brings us right back to where we started. If you try to force a rigid, linear, modern blueprint onto a city that has watched millennia casually roll by, you are going to lose.
You'll just be frustrated.
Exactly. You have to throw away the itinerary.
Yeah.
You have to find the rhythm. You have to let the city happen to you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take that question about time with you. Keep wondering, and we will catch